the issue of high rates of Indigenous incarceration and deaths in custody was certainly thrust into the spotlight by these Black Lives Matter protests, and a Liberal Senator, Matthias Cormann, was critical of these protesters on Sky News yesterday, calling people selfish and reckless for attending these rallies in the middle of a pandemic. He says there are other ways to channel legitimate concern about Indigenous inequality without threatening public health, and he doubled down on those criticisms today.
I mean, these mass gatherings should never have happened. I mean, we are preventing pubs in many parts of Australia, restaurants and hotels from having patrons in normal numbers arrive at their venues. I mean, lots of people are still unemployed because they're paying the price for the community's effort to keep the community safe. So of course we shouldn't impose that sort of risk on the community at this point in time.
Now, Indigenous Labor Senator Malarndirri McCarthy has gone further than her colleagues in throwing support behind these protests and also calling for the Prime Minister to pull together a national cabinet to deal with these issues.
The Prime Minister has been able to pull together a national cabinet to deal with the pandemic in this country in terms of COVID-19. Well, I would say to Matthias Cormann and the Prime Minister, pull together a national cabinet to reduce the high rates of incarceration and Aboriginal deaths in custody.
This groundswell of support for Indigenous issues, well, there are calls for it to be used to advance another lightning rod issue for Indigenous Australians, and that is constitutional recognition. The Indigenous Affairs Minister, Ken Wyatt, has said in the past week that it will be incredibly unlikely to achieve a referendum in this term of government. This morning he told Sky News it'll now take a miracle.
Well, I remain optimistic, but if I look at the pragmatic element to this, COVID-19 has impacted, and that's not an excuse, it is a reality of fact. The work we wanted to do that we had timelined, we couldn't. If a miracle is to occur and we have a set of words that people agree to, anything is possible.
So the Indigenous Affairs Minister saying it's not an excuse that the pandemic has simply overshadowed the pursuit of consensus on this Indigenous recognition. Annalise?